All right, welcome everybody to Dave Cooper Live, where we connect the leaders of the AEC and manufacturing industry with the people, the products, and the processes to help them build it better. Going from the field to behind the desk is what Pete Majewski learned in terms of mission critical prefab. Is there a disconnect between what happens on site versus offsite as it relates to industrialized construction? We're talking about the prefab value stream. And of course, where all the value lies, which is the resulting physical building. Here to bridge the gap between what's engineered to order and physically delivered, please welcome this technical solutions executive as he surveys the prefab landscape from the perspective of his current and previous roles. That's right, he was a project manager, modular delivery, and prefabs op managers, and how those learnings apply to his current work at Autodesk. But first, as you all know, we can't do any of this without all of our sponsors. So let's take a quick moment and thank them. And check out the new sponsor at the end of this clip. Stream Modular, the only logistics company you need to transport your mods, pods, and panels. Our friends at Stream Modular are investing $50 million over the next 25 years to build the technology, solutions, and trailers needed to handle and transport the projects of today and meet the demands of tomorrow. Reach out to their team at streammodular.com to discuss your next project. CombiLift is the largest global manufacturer of multi-directional forklifts and straddle carriers, a leader in long load handling solutions, offering a free warehouse and site optimization design service. CombiLift helps companies of all sizes and from every industry maximize the capacity, safety, and efficiency of their warehouse and storage facilities. A big thank you to Paul Short and the team at CombiLift for helping us all to build it better. Visit them at combilift.com. Ready to scale up your offsite construction business? Introducing 4A Constructs, your solution to finding skilled labor for offsite manufacturing. Say goodbye to the headache of recruiting a skilled workforce with hand-selected certified tradesmen that are expertly trained and managed for offsite manufacturing, set crews, and finished crews, ensuring maximum productivity and safety. Unlock the future of skilled workforce development for all of your offsite construction needs. Visit them at 4aconstructs.com. All right, again, thank you to all of our sponsors and welcome to the team 4A Constructs. We are looking forward to you being part of our industry and helping all the new manufacturers, existing manufacturers, get their lines up and running efficiently and effectively with your labor. So thanks so much, Trey, and the team over there at 4A Constructs. All right, without further ado, let's bring on Pete Majewski. Pete, welcome to the Dave Cooper Live Show. How are you today, my friend?
Oh, Dave, all well, sir. Hope everything is all right your way. And just as I start, and I will continue to say so, thank you very much for having me on today. Very exciting to kick off a couple of discussions that personally are very near and dear to me. So excited to jump into it and have a little back and forth.
You know what's great about this conversation for me, Pete, other than I think you're a nice guy and I run into you all the time, is that you come from practical experience in the field, right, to now in-house, helping bring the field and in-house or back office stuff together. You have a very unique perspective on how all of this stuff works. And you see it not only from the field, but you're working at Autodesk, which has the insights and the wherewithal to some of the best technology out there just because of who they are. So you're a unique breed, as I like to say.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll take it for as much of a compliment as it may be, and also, take a little bit some of the fanciness away from it. But no, I truly have been following interest and passion of mine. I've been fortunate to do so in a career fashion the last number of years. And just the long and short of kind of where I'm at today is a culmination of always being curious and wanting to learn how more things happen. And most importantly, learn about the things that I either don't know how to do or have an interest to get into. So if I were to take that and kind of outline it to my career, I've always been in the, I'd say more of the mission critical side of the industry. built hospitals for a number of GCs before getting into the specialty electrical and MEP application of it. And then ultimately, with my role now at Autodesk, have very much a software role of the side of the industry. So that's been extremely awesome in terms of the variety of exposure as well as different perspectives I've gotten. So if I were to say, to loop everything in together in terms of different roles and responsibilities across different companies and all the different logos I've worked with, is that it all aims towards the same end goal, and that's constructing awesome buildings.
So let's jump in, and you kind of went ahead there and kind of gave a little brief overview of your background. So I have a couple questions there, right? In our opening monologue, we talked a little bit about your role in prefab, from construction, modular delivery to really general contracting and doing oversight on these projects. Tell us a little bit about how you cut your teeth in the offsite industry.
So during my time with MC Dean, I'd say that the transitions between a lot of different market sectors, as well as the business units that filtered through the facility of mine, was very much timed well with a lot of the complex work happening in the industry. But I'd say a little bit of luck and also timing. I was able to have some exposure to some really complex and interesting jobs that really show the core of heavy MEP systems. So it's a lot of pipe and a lot of wires. And I say that because I'm not in the business of overcomplicating things or wasting time when it comes to helping folks understand what it is. When you get into the heavy industry that supports those MEP systems and even those specialty contracting items that go beyond those three, you really fall into a world where it's very much based on direct value-added work that somebody has to be turning wrenches, tools, and showing up to work every day to perform. So for me, the best part about being at the offsite facility as it was scaling through those market sectors was not only being able to see all the different scopes of work and different companies and different logos and clients that were coming through the facility, but watching how the folks in the field, the true craftsmen and tradesmen who are out there doing their craft every day. I was also able to see how this type of offsite and modular approach transformed their perspectives and their approach, because it changed the way that everybody was doing work. It didn't change who people were, but it very much has started to change the approach towards those same project delivery means.
Yeah, so let's hop into it, right? Because we laid out a couple questions on our team here that I think will help us kind of walk through your journey and really explain a lot of this to everybody out there and the lessons learned. Your perspective on the industry changed after getting into software, and can elaborate on that a little bit, because to me it's like, all right, why would your perspective change just because all of a sudden you're looking at software?
So I'm going to be able to answer that in some ways using the same terminology. Perspective is probably the most important word to me in terms of my current career outlooks, aspirations, and even just really understanding how I, as an individual, can help teams, or more importantly, other people. So when the software aspect has become my day-to-day routine now, I wouldn't go as far to say that it's a matter of me leaving a part of the industry and getting into something completely new, but it really just is a broadening of perspective. So I was fortunate in my last roles to always have a little bit of a foot in the door with software and some of that the digital tooling that was happening in the trades. What's different now is that my day-to-day is focused primarily on those support functions and those tools, rather than having it as a sidebar in delivering work full time. So in a way, it's almost flip-flopped to where now I have a lot more time that's spent on the actual background support and the tools, the development, the adoption, most importantly, the awareness of where it can be used and how it can be used.
Yeah.
And it's a great balance to being more familiar with different folks in the industry, different market sectors, and even just geographically speaking. It's funny because everybody knows, if you're out running a job, running a factory, you spend very little time poking your head above the bushes to see what other people are doing. And right now, I have a little bit more flexibility to be able to see what's going on industry wide, which has truly been eye opening. So it's not only that mission critical aspect through that heavy MEP systems and the healthcare type of delivery. I'm able to see quite a vast view on what's happening
Right.
in the field space.
When you made that transition, was it kind of eye opening to understand where the disconnects were happening coming from, being in the field to being on the software side, or did it take a while before you started putting the pieces together?
It's, half and half. It's coming from the side that had nothing to do with deploying software
Yeah.
in terms of my day-to-day responsibilities. It was easy to know where the gaps exist on the field front, right? So
Right.
operationally speaking, what communication might not be happening, or even worse, when there's perceived communication where everyone
Yeah.
assumes it's happening. On the software side, what's ironic is that it's not like my awareness for those has just disappeared. But what's different now is that having conversations about those gaps, or I wear a different hat now. So it's always
Right.
interesting when I talk to folks from the industry, who spend their 60 hours a week in a job site trailer, and for me to say, hey, I know what that's like. Doesn't come off as genuine as it used to when I had a hard hat in the back of my truck. So it's that balance that comes into play, knowing who's communicating, who's not, and even when it comes to the gap side of it, gaps exist in all places. So the ones that I've learned about now on the software side are very different than what I thought would have existed from the industry side. So I think I'm fortunate to be able to see both sides of it, as
Right.
opposed to thinking that there's a single way to draw X's and O's on the whiteboard.
Let's hop into it here, and get into some of this. So, let's talk about project lifecycle, right? Where does the idea of project lifecycle resonate within the teams you're working with, currently?
So, and actually, while I'm talking here, why don't we pull up some of those photos I shared? And we'll start simple, and I'll use this as a bit of a good, bad, and the ugly, at least from my opinion, in terms
Sure.
of the different approaches. And don't let those words scare you in terms of there being actual good, bad, and ugly photos that are coming up here. I purely do it as a perspective to say, hey, here's how my analysis has changed over times. So the idea of project lifecycle is definitely a core area I like to focus on, because as a business, so as a contractor, everybody is after that transition. We spoke earlier, that blue dollars to green dollars, right? And I love using that analogy because it really shows what happens when you outline things on paper or PowerPoint, and everything looks great in plan. So theory works great, practice might tell you a different story. So when it comes to project lifecycle, I bring that up because it's what everybody is chasing in terms of building that CRM or that client list, and all of the folks people are doing work with, because you want to get as much scope as possible, right? And much scope that you're comfortable with, be able to risk mitigate, and all those other awesome buzzwords and practices that exist. But the idea of project lifecycle is that you have transparency end to end. So if it's a complex project, or even one that might not be deemed as that complex, if you were to break it down to its core elements and track it from the schematic design phase all the way through the engineering and detailing and fabrication and manufacturing, commissioning and install, and ultimately that turnover, there's still a piece of operations and maintenance that gets thrown into that. So that's what really expands that whole life cycle idea. And you could refer to it as a value stream. And that terminology is much more common in the manufacturing industry, but I think very relevant to what we do in construction. And the idea there is that value stream would essentially be the steps that are required. And I wouldn't say bare minimum, but
Mhm.
it's basically outlining all your process steps to where you cannot remove any piece of it in order to have that end product. But most importantly, it's all of the required steps that have to happen to transform the material into the finished product. So in construction, it's a finished building. So I like to say that I'm fortunate to have never missed a paycheck in the construction industry, but by that definition, I also have never done any direct value added work.
What is the most overlooked part of the value stream during modular delivery in your mind?
So I would say that there's two areas. I'd be hard pressed to pick one overall, but I'd say QA and specialized logistics. So QA being quality assurance
Okay.
is not the same as quality control. The main difference there is quality assurance is preventing the defects.
Mhm.
Quality control is identifying and counting them. So the reason that's important from a offsite prefab and modular approach is that you can have very, very sophisticated teams that are QC focused, robust checklists, processes, everything you want could be detailed out on that front in terms of it being recordable, easy to find, and organized. But if you're not doing anything in practice to create a process that avoids the defect, you're you're going to be stuck driving the car with the
Right.
rearview mirror. So that's one aspect of it, especially when it comes to the testing and commissioning scopes through the offsite process. And then the other area, which is actually very coincidental in terms of today's sponsors and me being passionate about it, but the other overlooked area would be the specialized logistics arm. So
Yeah.
when you think about how many times people go into a project and they're focusing on a drawing review or in a model or in a procurement plan, the folks that overlook that logistics function in terms of the route surveys and swinging the modules into place, or even just coordinating the deliveries from a material and warehousing standpoint, learn the hard way that that is such a necessary step and a legitimate shared service within many companies that needs to be taken seriously for successful project delivery.
Earlier, a few minutes ago, you mentioned, blue dollars, green dollars, or blue money, green money. Can you kind of just elaborate on that a little bit and explain what that truly means? Because I'm baffled.
Yeah. So I'm a big analogy guy, as you
Yeah,
know, Dave.
yeah.
So when it comes to trying to explain, especially in a work setting, how to merge abstract level thought with tactical level detail, I draw on that as a way to say that we can outline things in a document on a whiteboard. We can build PowerPoints. We can do process maps. We can do a phenomenal amount of planning work to detail things out and build a plan. But we have to face the reality that all of those efforts go towards generating some sort of work for the business, right? So it's the blue dollars are the planning phase, right? So it's all theory. It's all, hey, if we do this, it should work. Let's build a plan out. Green dollars is the actual deliverable of what people have paid for. So in construction, you see a lot of happening right now, especially on the software side with the 3D modeling, 4D modeling, and everything else that's helping with the coordination and collaboration amongst the job. Until that finished building is up and you hit the light switch and the lamp turns on, you don't have a finished product. And that is ultimately what that customer is paying for. So in terms of value stream, the goal for everybody, regardless of what type of contract you are, if it's the GC, a subcontractor, everybody's working towards that end goal of the finished space for that building owner. And that is the deliverable in construction. Hey, Dave, you might be muted there.
All right, so let's elaborate. So I'm sorry about that. My mute was cut on for whatever reason. Let's elaborate a bit on the focus of trades and the customer client facing trades specifically. What is your thoughts on the trades? I mean, the lack of, we have more of, trades are doing more, and we're going to get into some of that. But right now, let's talk about what it's like for the client facing trades.
Awesome question. What's most beautiful about it is it ties right to that value stream piece. So if you really were to detail out who's doing the work and who's driving that direct value add, absolutely it's the trades. Not only that, if you were to break into the actual metrics with the overall full-time equivalents, personnel on site, all that points to the trades. People like to talk a lot about the labor shortages, which is very relevant in today's discussion. But without digging into any of those rabbit holes in terms of, hey, how do we boost the trades involvement? How do we show more to the trades? I'd like to acknowledge the fact that a lot of these trade contractors are doing a phenomenal job seeking out more work that's direct prime contract related, but more importantly, they're building some very strong relationships direct to the owners. I'd almost say that it goes in line with today's world of the DIY activity. So if you need to look something up, and folks are learning how to work on their cars on YouTube, or myself, if I'm doing home projects and I'm trying to figure out something that I wasn't able to learn from the job site or the factories, it's such an abundance of information between the digital tools, the software, the internet. And I think, again, to stretch an analogy here, if we were to take that same concept where everybody's becoming a little bit more capable of learning things themselves, it just shows you that the trades who know how to deliver very, very complex work can also learn how to take on a little bit more of the administrative scope. That's not to say that it's easy. There's a lot of risk that comes along with managing schedules, budgets, and contracts. But if you were to survey the landscape now, and especially a lot of the different market sectors, especially those that are MEP heavy, you see a lot of these contractors that are sitting at the owner's table, helping dictate how the next jobs are phased, or more importantly, picking their other trade contractors.
That's interesting, right? Because we've been seeing super trades now pretty heavy for the last 10 years on site work, right? Where they're doing the site, they're doing the infrastructure, and they're also doing the foundations and then leaving it to the next person from there. But what you're saying is with the use of software and being able to manage projects easier and the ability to learn, wherever you are, that now the super trades can move to, more like the mechanical trades, like you were talking about, the MEP focused trades, the modular MEP focused trades can take on more work on their part to include administrative and scheduling and all of those things because software is making it easier. So you see a whole new class of like super subs.
Whole new class. And actually, I'll throw in my own terminology there. I love the super subs phrasing.
Yeah.
I've fallen really into the researching and the historical aspect of it. I think it's bringing back more of a master builder type of approach towards the industry. So when you see the construction managers, right? So it's a CM at risk, or a general contractor. For a while, there was that aspect where GC really wasn't general contracting. They were a little bit more of the CM or CM at risk scopes. But we know the names as being pretty interchangeable, especially on the software side of the industry. So boots on the ground build aspect, very important to know the contracting structure and whose scope is what. As I've been a little bit more removed, now I see how some of the terminology might be incorrectly interchanged, and that's okay as long as everybody knows who's supposed to be at the table in terms of stakeholders. But the trades really do hold such an influence with bringing back that aspect of owning more scopes of work, building those relationships, and more importantly, in many cases, they're the same companies who not only build new construction for an average lifespan or duration of 18 to 24 months for a new building. Average lifespan of a building now is in decades. So if you look at the post turnover duration, those O&M contracts and that service work is just as important for those contractors as the first few months of the vertical build work.
Interesting. So we got super trades or, super subs, whatever we're going to call them on the site, doing all that. Now we have it in the MEP and modular world, doing more administrative work and maybe not just doing electrical, but they're also doing HVAC. What about the owners and the end users of projects? Are they becoming more involved?
Absolutely. And I think that is definitely a key area that you could attribute to the software abundance now, and especially tools that make it very easy to share documentation or the review phases as well. So if you're breaking out the owner activity throughout a project, no longer are they only relying on meeting minutes from an OAC meeting or getting periodic updates that have been filtered through a game of telephone. There's many owners that I've seen that are directly involved in their project documentation from the onset of the job. So that in itself is really changing the way that information is shared in terms of different stakeholders and activities. So at one point, having a completed binder was your attic stock and warranties and O&Ms that were handed over. That closeout phase is absolutely still happening. But I'm always amazed to see the amount of owners that have entered into the space that have really taken it upon themselves to get immersed in the job.
Yeah.
And I would say are arguably as involved as the people who are building full time.
And I remember when we were building the binders that we'd give the end user for whatever it was, like that thick of warranty and every part and piece that's in the building, so on and so forth. Now it can all be digitized. And if you're not digitizing yet, you better get on board. My goodness, golly. So with that, then, how does, software bring all of this full circle? Is it bringing it full circle? Is software helping us build it better and
Absolutely.
deliver better projects?
Absolutely. So I think that the real piece that software does is that it complements two of the most important aspects of the build industry: people and process. And what software is doing is it's tying everybody together in terms of a way to uh, ease of communication, ease of collaboration. It's also allowing people to hedge on transparency where appropriately so. So, in terms of, I'll table the thoughts on the different permission settings and access and who's in what environment and who has access to what aspects of data and dashboards. All that's important. But what the software and the whole digital landscape is doing for the build industry is that it's allowing everybody to collaborate a little bit more quickly, a little bit more efficiently. And most importantly, it's doing this documentation scope that is very much needed in the industry, but again, isn't part of the direct value stream of building. So it's absolutely valuable, it's absolutely necessary, but that's really where software comes into play, is that it is, especially in the AI and ML landscape today,
Yeah.
it's automating a lot of that administrative work that is not directly aligned to the construction of the building.
Got it. Should we look at some more of those photos that you had?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll use this as a way to explain scope here, right? So very straightforward. I like this photo because it's clean. It's consolidated to what a typical scope for an electrical contractor is going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have some low voltage panels, transformers, and the idea here is that this is your scope regardless of how you're delivering it. So if you were to stick build on site versus build in a modular factory and ship across the US, your scope here is still the same as it corresponds to your specs and submittals, everything you owe to the project. The key to remember here is that the packaging is different. So in this case, it's a modular electrical room, and there's many different ways that this could be kitted out or shipped to the project site that may not be a full volumetric module. So it could be the kitted panels or various aspects of the overhead pipe assembly, wire troughs, terminated transformers with your primary and secondary just on a skid or even still on the pallet that came from the manufacturer. So the key there is knowing your scope and how the packaging works. Nonetheless, I start here as the square one in terms of identifying your scope and most importantly, reminding all the stakeholders that one of the most important things is knowing who's doing what on your jobs. So in the software world, I like to call it work packaging. Build side of the world, it's usually getting everyone together around the water cooler or some toolbox talks and figure out if everyone knows what's going on for the day.
Right.
And that is an aspect of scope to be delivered. And this one I'll have to explain in a little bit more detail. But what we're looking at here is actually a modular electrical room that we placed a concrete floor in. So it's a 4-inch slab being placed. And it was absolutely a humongous module, over 73 feet long, 14 feet wide, easily over 100,000 pounds of weight that was shipped. A lot of different avenues of discussion I could use this one for, but to tie it into that specialized logistics function, this was one that of course, required the typical route surveys and coordination and swing, but it was actually part of a DC shutdown. So we had to shut down a downtown DC to make a couple swings through, and the roads in downtown DC rather. And the way that a lot of these projects are approached is that this is an engineered to order system. This was never intended to be something that's scaled out in terms of widgets, but it's a great example on how that same value stream and process can be applied to very unique one-off situations.
So was that as a finished project? It's at 100,000 pounds. I mean, just the floor is not 100,000. That was a full volume metric build that was being delivered, correct?
Yes, and purposely, you'll see enough electrical components in the next few photos here. What I like about this one is that I'm not a concrete guy, Dave. So what I had to do was spend a few days crash course, calling around, figuring out who the peers were, coordinating with the trade contractor on site. And it was a matter of, hey, help me understand and help me help you with what a successful delivery looks like.
Yeah.
Aside from going through a spec and submittal and a schedule and treating it like a purchase order. So
got it.
The picture doesn't do enough to jump off the page and tell the story, but this is one of my favorite photos thinking back to probably a few sleepless nights, but more importantly, just the fact that something that could be so complex, detailed out on paper, can easily come to a physical execution based on having the right stakeholders involved. And actually, last point on this one would be the steel here is AISC. It's full structural steel for the building. So this is not your typical structural package that turns into a miscellaneous metals package in its end use. This was truly a part of the structure of the building it was finally set in.
Got it. Perfect.
And this is going to bring us back into that idea of packaging. So when it comes to conveyances and scope and the overall sorting and going beyond the bills of material, one of the first steps during the offsite phase is obviously to figure out what scope you're going to take on in terms of prefab opportunities. And then as you drill into each specific assembly, very important to identify the bills of material. Well, it's easy to group together nuts and bolts and some of those regular consumables. But when you get into equipment designations, transformers, and items that are truly part of the system of that building, there's many times where you have to think through redoing some layouts, proposing some other ideas with partitions in order to make that offsite module viable. Not only for the building contractor who's building the new construction phase of the job, but also keeping in mind that owner and the fact that a lot of these areas will have to be maintained and easily accessible later down the road. And that's something that has to come into play during the design phase. It's similar to working on your car, right? And you need to change the oil, but there's how many things that are in front of the pan you're trying to get to, right?
Right.
So we want to avoid any situation like that where possible through the modular delivery process as well.
Pre-planning.
So in this case, I like pointing out the hanging transformer here. It's not typical, very, very specific to that offsite and prefab delivery. And again, it just shows a vast means and methods on what can be done outside of the overall MEP delivery while going through prefab and offsite opportunities.
All right.
So I said good, bad, and ugly earlier. Everybody has their own opinion here, and I'm going to use head walls as an example. Head walls, totally valid and awesome idea to mobilize on a project, especially when getting all your trade contractors on board. So by definition, you're incurring more of a multi-trade assembly. That's great. Checks a few boxes down your specifications and CSI format list. But one of the areas of difficulty is identifying the best ways to standardize on the components. So if each wall is customized and it's bespoke to the architectural plans, you might have a 7'6" wall, an 8'2" wall, a 14-foot wall, or whatever they might be, right? So from the onset of a project, it's very important to be involved and say, okay, like, how can we standardize this? Even if it's not to a productized approach, but enough to where there's a standard for the job, or more importantly, a standard for the folks that are putting this together to know how to tag, how to identify, and especially tying in that logistics portion of it later, so that you're not sorting through stacks of walls that might have to go out of sequence. So very important to have some early collaboration with the owner, GC, different trade contractors, maybe the owner's reps from some of the healthcare providers that get very involved with these types of items, especially when it's something that is very near and dear to the end user case, right? So these are ultimately going to be in some of the most frequented rooms in a hospital. And those are the people that get very involved, and for good reason, during the build phase. So there's no such thing as over communicating when going through any type of multi-trade work. And in this case, it's a matter of knowing what the scope is, who needs to be there, but most importantly, some of your fundamentals like packaging and tagging become the most vital part of head wall delivery. And then my last photo here, I use as a way to harmonize your job site as well as a successful modular delivery. So when you look at this photo here, you see some existing steel, you see an adjacent wall that's placed, and a very clearly a construction site, right? So it's not the prettiest and cleanest. This isn't something that you'd expect while rolling through a offsite factory. However, this is the end goal. This is what success looks like. So not everything is going to be buttoned up with the fresh coat of paint, fresh coat of gypsum, and ready for turnover. But this is what success looks like in terms of adequately packaging your scope, building it off-site, testing, commissioning, and deploying it to the site, and having a successful integration that is now done, and ready to go for the next trade overlap. So
was that added to that building, or are you saying this is the modular manufacturing?
This is the final building.
Got it. So it's sitting where it's supposed to be.
Final set, and that's where it's success. So this is done. It's on site. Everything within the four corners of that room has been tied in to each other. So all the branch circuitry and the mechanical systems will be run to it, and then most importantly, the aesthetics will be going up after. So this is the end of that life cycle.
Got it.
Before you chase the O&M.
Yeah. Perfect. Right. So, I mean, it can just be kits or pieces of any building, just like bath pods are becoming popular and everything else. So you're saying on the MEP side, we can deliver full MEP rooms that are kitted out, ready to go for quick connections to the rest of the building. And you're saving yourself a whole ton of effort on site trying to get that coordinated and approved locally.
100%, Dave.
Huh. Love it. I mean, it's not new, right? I mean, it's not new to us, but I think it's new to 90% of the construction world out there. They still haven't figured out that there are very, efficient ways, just like we're talking about here, to streamline and get more work done with less, period. And like you said, when you can have more work done with, less or manufactured process, such as doing the MEPs in a prefab format, whether it's just the wall, whether, it's a full volumetric build, it's allowing contractors and trades to get more work done on site with less people, because the majority of the work's being done in a manufacturing facility, at least the hard stuff.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. What, if anything, to clarify, we mentioned value streams, right, of prefab. But another term that is thrown around out there all the time, and I just want your opinion on this, and then we're going to close up here in a sec, is digital transformation. What does, in your mind, digital transformation actually mean?
So, to me, digital transformation is really about identifying how to best tie people, process together. It obviously has that software and digital connotation, being that you wouldn't have digital transformation if there wasn't a digital tool to it. But what's happening is that people have connected workflows in construction. It's not a matter of saying that the workflows are disconnected, because if your workflows were disconnected, you wouldn't be making money and people would be out of a job. So the workflows are connected. They could be more efficient, and there's some gaps that could be bridged. But digital transformation, specifically in the construction industry, is allowing you to connect your digital workflows that previously were done in a number of point solutions or just non-existent due to the requirements of the job or absence of the offering. So construction is about people and process.
Yeah.
What the digital world is doing is helping connect those digital workflows and those software applications that previously everybody was trying to figure out on their own or in silos. So there's been a lot of light coming towards the industry in terms of technology adoption and really just leveraging a lot of the technologies that many other industries have used going on a few decades now. But most importantly, putting them in the hands of the trades and the folks in the field who ultimately are delivering the work.
Are we still in last place in this industry when it comes to, you know, moving forward with technology or any, you know, I mean, agriculture was ahead of us a few years ago. I don't know if they still are. I don't pay attention to that stuff, but I'm just curious. You said at Autodesk, are we still lagging behind as last place when it comes to technology and advancement?
You know, I see a lot of different reports and metrics and all
Yeah.
sorts of graphs and studies on it. And yes, that is a theme that pops up on a few of them. We always are back and forth with agriculture. But I think if we were to really strip away what that means, is that we're still figuring out how to do it and improve it for the industry.
Right.
There's no, at least as of yet, there's no robots that build buildings. So taking that type of technology and software approach and throwing it right in the construction industry hasn't drastically changed a lot recently, right? But if we were to look at the technology race in terms of market sectors across each other, it really goes back to identifying how each set of blue dollars and green dollars might look a little bit different for every industry. And in construction, we have something special. That the custom and bespoke approach is what sells in a lot of cases. However, that's also the prime opportunity for software to help expedite the innovation, and most importantly, let people focus on the actual build rather than some of the nuanced documentation and logging.
All right. This is my last question, and we got to wrap it up. So we're going to make it a quick answer too, because we're getting up here on time.
You got it.
AI is a hot topic right now, and I don't want to get into what it does and if it is it good, is it bad for the industry. But now we're having conversations where AI can be used with these robots, and they can build bespoke projects one after the other because AI can now translate all that data into what it needs to be doing versus how it used to be, where it was very manual and you had a team of programmers sitting there. If you change one robot, you had to change the next 15 down the line, right? What's your final thoughts on that?
Oh, I was glad you didn't bring up AI and ML earlier. I've listened to those talks over the last couple months here, but no, I'm teasing. It's totally relevant to what's happening. So a lot of my awareness in that space is truly from the direct peers and the general research that can be done for it. What I'd say is most interesting for somebody like me, especially coming from the build side of the industry into software now, is knowing that there's now a space where very technologically advanced areas, such as robotics, need subject matter expertise from folks who know how to build. And I think that's going to be the most interesting to see over these next couple months and years here, is that there's this whole AI umbrella that has blossomed and turned into a lot of different opportunities for folks. And I think when some of the sparkles and dust settles from that application to where everybody's looking at the chat GPTs and some of the other tools out there, I think you'll see a number of offerings that pop up specific for construction.
I love it. I love it. Joel Hutchins, look at that hair. Good afternoon, Joel. I hope all is well. Thanks for saying hello. Glad you could join us. Greg Ugaldi as well. Great discussion with Pete. Where does Pete's term blue dollar come from? And we already discussed that. So sorry, Greg didn't see that question earlier, but thanks for tuning in, and the rest of you out there for tuning in. But we are out of time. Pete, is there anything that I did not ask you that you wanted to make sure you shared today?
Not off the top of my head. But again, Dave, I have to say thanks for everything you do and having me on the show. Much a pleasure.
Hey, listen, it's all my pleasure. Our job is to tell your story, and everybody else out there gets to learn. And even Joel agrees with you. He said, well said. What about your hair, or what Pete had to say? Got the best head of hair. I'm jealous. All right, listen, Pete, don't go anywhere. The rest of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in. And make sure you thank these sponsors as well, because we cannot continue to bring you all these informative conversations without them. Pete, I'll come back to you at the end of the show. Everybody else out there, it's Monday. You got 4.5 more days to build it better. Let's get to it. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching. What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you. And as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching.